Bibles, thank you for the song. Turn your Bibles to Genesis 37. Turn my microphone on here. Genesis chapter 37. Then if you would like to stand this evening, I know a lot of you are in your car. You can't do that. But if you're home or wherever, and you're able, if you stand with me, Genesis chapter 37. I'm going to read just a few verses here. I'm going to start reading in verse 3. It says, "Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheep rose, and also stood upright. Behold, your sheep stood round about, and made obeisance to my sheep." We'll stop there. We're going to cover some more this evening as we go through the message, but we'll stop there for right now. Let's have a word of prayer. Lord, I pray that you will you'll use this evening, Lord. I pray that you will help me not to get in the way of the message tonight, Lord. You know, I'm dealing with a pretty intense headache this evening, Lord. I pray that you will help that to not get in the way of the message and of what you have for us tonight, Lord. I pray that you will just bless this time in your word. I pray this in your name. Amen. You can go ahead and be seated. This evening in this series, as I've been saying, trying to have us see God in every situation, and all sorts of different situations, and most specifically, what I've been trying to look at as I'm studying and reading through for this is in situations that we either tend to overlook Him, or situations that we think, well, God couldn't possibly be a part of. Like we've looked at to this point in this series, God in things like the catastrophic with Noah or with Adam's sin and so forth, seeing God in those situations where we normally miss Him. Now, where we started tonight, the life of Joseph is familiar to us. Joseph is born to his father, and as the passage we just read tells us, his old age is immediately favored by his father above his brothers, which, one might think is a good thing. Being your favorite child would have some perks. As I prepared for this, I thought, I bet everyone who came from a family with more than one kid thinks that their parent treated one kid better than them. Every kid thinks their parent has a favorite, and I don't know if you've ever noticed this, no kid seems to think it's them. Every kid thinks their parent has a favorite, and they all think it must be one of the others. It's not often that you talk to someone who thinks they were the favorite. They always think, well, the other got some sort of special treatment that I didn't. For instance, if you asked my brother, he would tell you, I was the baby, so I got away with everything. I'm not sure why he thinks that, because I don't think I got away with a whole lot at all. I won't say I didn't get away with anything, but I certainly didn't get away with everything. But then on the other hand, if you asked me, I don't know that I would say Bo was their favorite, but being the oldest, he definitely had perks that the youngest didn't. For instance, my brother was always wanting to wear cowboy boots and hats and that style of clothing, and he was much more into it than I was, but that's what he liked, so that's what he got. As the younger brother, I got Bo's hand-me-downs. So I wouldn't say favorite, but as the oldest, in that, he got a little bit more of what he wanted, and I only remember that because I got an attitude about that one time, and I stressed one time, because I didn't want to wear cowboy boots and hat and got in trouble for the attitude. And again, I stressed one time. You get in enough trouble, you don't do that, make that mistake again. But being, a favorite like Joseph had some perks. You get the nicest of things, which we see. Joseph had the coat of many colors. We don't see the other brothers getting anything like that. We don't we don't see them getting some special gift that sets them aside. And the coat must have been something that they all were jealous of, because it was the coat that he was given that made his brothers see that he was more loved. Being the favorite, you get the nicest of things, or maybe being the favorite, you get special treatment. Your parents are harder on the others than the favorite, or they expect the brothers to go out and do the chores, but you don't have to. There are perks, but being Dad's favorite in this case, while it may have seemed like a good thing, some serious issues came along with it. The biggest being that it caused his brothers to hate him. We saw that in verse 4, when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. Verse 11, we see the same thing. His brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying. Verse 18, if you skip down a little bit further, verse 18, when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. There's a real problem here. Sure, Dad loves you over the rest, but he can only protect you to a point. And if you notice in those verses we just looked at, 4, 11, and 18, there's a progression. The hatred that they had grew. Starts off verse 4, his brothers hated him because he was the favorite. They saw that Dad loved him more than he loved them, and they hated Joseph. That's starting off pretty strong. Hate is one of those, I try not to use the word hate very often because I was taught what it meant. Often we throw it out there. I hate traffic. I hate what the person said to me. I hate them for what they did. The word hate means to wish they had never been born. And while, yes, I do wish traffic had never been born, there are not a lot of other things that as a Christian we should be saying we wish weren't alive. But that's exactly where Joseph's brothers were. This wasn't just a word to them. Hate is what they were doing. Their dad prefers Joseph and they hate him for it. They wished he had never been born. Remember, he's the youngest by far. Meaning they all remembered what it was like before Joseph was born. They knew how things were before he was born, and they knew, well, we had it pretty good back then, and they just wished it would go back to that. But then that hatred, it grows from there. They go from hating him, wishing he hadn't been born, to in verse 11 we saw they're envying him, because now not only is he our father's favorite, but he must also be God's favorite, because he's having these dreams from God that we saw in the first couple of verses that we read. And those dreams are saying that he's going to rule over us. And while they all got mad about it, being that he was Dad's favorite, if Dad gave his blessing to Joseph, they all knew it was possible. They can get mad about it, and they can say it's not right. I'm the oldest. I should have this. They can say that all they want. But in those days, if Dad gave the blessing to Joseph, Joseph was the one in charge. And they all knew that, which would have made it worse. You know, it's bad enough that little brother is saying someday I'm going to be your boss. It's worse that he might be right. I guarantee that's what this envying is. It's them all saying, I want that for me. I want to be Dad's favorite. I want to be the heir that leads our family someday. I want Dad's blessing on me, not on him. I want to rule our brothers. It's no longer just I wish that Joseph weren't here, but it's grown into I want what he has. Then it grows even further as we know that they plotted against him. Verse 18, they begin to conspire against him. They all get together and they can see him coming, and they all hate him, and they all want to be in his position. Well, the easiest way for that to happen is to get rid of him. And I don't know if they thought it fully through, because there's a bunch of brothers. You get rid of one, that doesn't mean you're automatically the one that gets his position. So someone has the possibility of needing to get rid of a whole bunch of brothers if they're going to get their way to the top of this. But they can't all be the favorite. But this has grown all the way from he's Dad's favorite and we hate him for it. We wish he wouldn't have been born, life was better before. to now they're at the place of, we'll just kill him and end it. And as we know, it goes from this to what would have just been in the life of Joseph a series of, I'm just going to put it this way, awful events. Thrown in a pit to be killed, sold as a slave, taken to a foreign country, accused of wrong that he hadn't done, thrown in prison, forgotten in prison. I mean, he faced a whole pile of things stacked against him, and yet, while going through all of that, God was with Joseph in all of them, and was made obvious throughout it all. Tonight, what I want us to do is to look at 4 major events that happened in the life of Joseph after where we started. And these 4 major events that I'm going to have us look at are not necessarily highlights. They're not the things that you would want to look back on your life and remember. In fact, for the most part, it's terrible. But God was there. So the first is God in the pit. Look at chapter 37, where we started, verse number 19. And they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit, and we will say, Some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, Let us not kill him. And it goes on from there. But the brothers have conspired against him to slay him, and now here's their chance. Dad has sent little brother to come check on us in the field, and we can kill him now. Nobody's going to know, and throw his body in the pit and tell Dad a wild animal got him. They had this whole plan, but God was with Joseph and worked through Reuben. Remember, Reuben is just as mad as the other brothers. And being the oldest, probably had the most right to be. Because this position of being over everyone, this position of being blessed, should have been his. He had as much right, if not more, than anyone else to be mad at the little brother. He hates Joseph as much as they do, just like all the others. He saw that Joseph was favored, and he has envied Joseph just like the other brothers have, wishing that the special treatment that Joseph got, he could have, and wishing that he would someday be the one to lead the family. Again, he was, after all, the oldest. It should be him. He has conspired with the others to kill him, just like everyone else. This isn't that all of a sudden he has a change of heart. It's not like he was just a better guy than all his brothers and realized what they were doing was wrong. I've heard it said, actually this week read a message saying, well, it was a matter of that he was the oldest, so would have been the most level-headed. And they threw him in the pit. So he thought, I have an older brother there, not the most level-headed. I'm just going to throw that theory out right now. But that was what this guy tried to claim. Well, that he threw him in the pit, and then he thought it through. His conscience got a hold of him. I don't believe that's it at all. I believe that it was simply a matter of God stepped in and used Reuben. Because that happens. God can use absolutely anyone, even evil people with evil intentions. God can use absolutely anyone that he wants to. And there have been times that God has used some of the most unlikely people to do his work. There have been times that God has used what we would deem ungodly and evil people to do what needs to be done. And I believe that's exactly what's happening here. Not that Reuben has a change of heart or that he thought better about it. No, not that he cooled down a little bit and then thought clearly. God got a hold of him and used it. Because God wasn't done with Joseph yet. God had things for Joseph to do. And while this would have seemed like a terrible event, I mean, it's pretty terrible when you come to see your family, your brothers, and they capture you and rip your coat off and throw you into a pit. I mean, Brother Hohenstreet's going to Idaho to see families. So, wouldn't that be a great reading if they grabbed you, ripped your coat off, and threw you in a pit and talked about killing you? Can you imagine what must have been going through Joseph's mind? All the possibilities of what they might do to you, or maybe that they won't do anything. Maybe they're just going to leave you down there to die of thirst or starvation, whichever comes first. I mean, it would be terrible to die from, an animal ripping you apart, or even your brothers killing you, but at least that's going to be quick. Dying of starvation or thirst in this hole would be a terrible, slow way to go. And I have to think all of these things were going through his mind, all the possibilities. We read this passage and we read the end. We read what happens, and it's familiar enough when we read the beginning of it, we already kind of in our mind are playing through how it ends. But we forget this was a real person with a real big problem. And remembering he was just a kid. This would be terrifying. This would be a terrifying experience he was going through. And while this was a terrible ordeal to go through, God was there from the hands of his brothers. God delivered him from whatever fate he may have faced in the pit. And while it doesn't sound great, again, God doesn't always do things the way we think he should. God delivered him by allowing him to be sold as a slave. Again, I know that doesn't sound to us like it's a great option, but it was God's deliverance from the alternative, from being killed by his brothers. God was with Joseph in the pit and delivered him. He protected him. God was with Joseph, number 2, in Potiphar's house. Turn over just a couple of chapters to Genesis chapter 39. I'm going to start reading in verse 1. It says, "And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph." Notice that. "And the Lord was with Joseph. And he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and served him, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had he put in his hand. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in the house, and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored." Now, I'm going to try to have us compartmentalize this for just a minute tonight, because we know the end of what happened, and we tend to read everything knowing that. But he went from his father's favorite child to thrown in a pit, to being sold and as a slave and drugged to a foreign land, drugged to Egypt, where he is now forced to serve Potiphar. There is no nice way to put that. This is terrible. If this was your life, this is miserable. I mean, you've been taken from your family, from everything you know. You're now forced to serve in Potiphar's house. And if you didn't know how this was all going to end, it'd be very easy in Joseph's shoes to say, where is God in all this? Where is God in all this? Why is he allowing this to happen to me? Why is he allowing me to go through all of these things? But God hadn't left Joseph. In fact, the verse we just read repeatedly, I tried to stress it as I read it, repeatedly says that God was with him. And that because God was with him, he was blessed. A couple of things to note. Joseph was blessed personally. We saw that in verse 2. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man. Prosperous is not a word that you normally associate with a slave.
Yeah.
Slave and prosperous typically don't go together. But Joseph wasn't prosperous because he had a good work ethic and a good attitude, and he worked super hard. He wasn't prosperous because he just lucked out and got put with a good master. He was prosperous because even in this terrible situation, God was with him. Even in what was awful, God was there. The second thing to note, that others could see that God was with him. We saw that in chapter 39, verse 3. And his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. Remember, this is Potiphar, an Egyptian man. It's not like Potiphar is a godly man who knows how to see God. It's not like this is a man who picked his slave he's going to buy because, I think that one is blessed of God. No, he doesn't choose his servants by seeing what is or who is blessed of God, but the way that Joseph lived in the middle of a terrible situation showed to others around him that God was with him. The way he lived, despite his circumstances, made others see God as here, which is really a convicting thought. It's easy to have a good testimony when things are going well for us. It's easy for us to live a life that shows people, God is working in them when things are going how we want them to. But things weren't exactly going Joseph's way. Most people would have given Joseph a pass had he had a bad attitude, because in his situation we all would have. But in the middle of this whole mess, he still lived in a way that God was seen in his life. This isn't the direction that I'm going with the message, but I want to kind of quickly throw this out there. When going through something terrible, can people around you tell by your life that God's with you when you're going through a problem? When we're going through those rough spots of life, those terrible days, can they see by the way we live, by the way you respond to problems, and recognize that person has God with them? They could tell with Joseph. They could tell that God was with this guy even as a slave. God was with Joseph in Potiphar's house and made Joseph prosper, and it was seen by others. And then, because God was with Joseph in Potiphar's house, it affected others. We saw that in verse 5 of time. I'm not going to have us read it, but everything that he did in Potiphar's house was blessed. Those around him were blessed because of God's working in him. Listen, Joseph could have gotten a bad attitude and decided, I'm not helping Potiphar. I'm a slave. I'm going to do the minimum that I have to get by. I'm not happy to be here. I don't like the people here. I shouldn't have to deal with this. I was back home in my fancy coat, and now I'm stuck here, so I'll just do what's best for me, but I'm not helping anyone else. I'm not going to make Potiphar prosper because I shouldn't have to serve him. But he didn't. Joseph figured out that God was with him and that he would bless. God was with Joseph in the pit and delivered. God was with Joseph in Potiphar's house and blessed. Number 3, God was with Joseph in the prison. Chapter 39 again, verse 20 and 21, it says, And Joseph's master took him and put him in the prison and placed him where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the prison. Joseph, I know we're skipping over quite a bit here. Joseph, who has done nothing but right. He is a slave in Potiphar's house, and yet everything he does causes Potiphar to be blessed and to be profitable. He's done nothing but right, but then his master's wife lies about him. He's sent to prison. I mean, he has got to get the feeling like every time he takes a step forward, he's shoved 10 giant steps backward. He finally has things looking up in the middle of what has been a rough time. God is blessing and he's prospering. His boss can see it and promotes him, and his boss is prospering. Things have to feel like they're finally looking up. And now this. I'm finally catching a break, and now this. But even in prison, God was with Joseph. God being with Joseph in prison meant, once again, he was favored. He was favored. The Bible tells us that he was favored of the guards. It's going to make life in prison a whole lot better. Because God was with him, he was favored. Even bigger than that, because God was with him, God provided a way out. The butler and the baker. And again, I know I'm skipping through a lot right now, but need to kind of pay attention a little bit here. Even in a series of low times, and this may have felt like the lowest, God had not abandoned Joseph. Even in what just seemed like one problem after another, God provided a way out. I mean, it's not a coincidence. Don't you think it's quite a coincidence that in prison he runs into the butler and the baker? I mean, what a coincidence that he's able to talk to these guys and hey, I happen to have experience with dreams and they have dreams. Look, what a coincidence that this all worked out. No, it was God providing. So far we've seen God in the pit delivered, God in Potiphar's house blessed, God in the prison provided, and then lastly tonight, I'm going to put it this way, God with Pharaoh. Look over at chapter 41, verse 14. It says, "Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph." And remember, this is after he's been forgotten. "Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, and he shaved himself and changed his raiment and came in unto Pharaoh." Skip down to verse 38 with me. It says, "And Pharaoh said unto his servants, Can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, For as much as God hath showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art." Joseph is now out of the prison, tells Pharaoh what his dream means, and God promotes him. God gives him the interpretation. Otherwise, you read that dream from Pharaoh, and I know we skipped over it. You read that dream from Pharaoh, and had God not given Joseph an interpretation, it makes no sense. I mean, we read it and we know how it ends. If you just read fat cows sitting there eating, skinny cows show up and eat the fat cows, what? I mean, cows aren't even carnivorous. Nothing about this makes sense, let alone the whole fat cow, skinny cow. Nothing about that makes sense by itself. What does that mean? And then you got the whole thing with the stalks of corn. I mean, what does that mean? No wonder no one else can interpret it. I can only imagine the looks on the faces of all his wise men when he brings them in and says, "Hey guys, this is what I dreamed. What's that mean?" Huh? You ate something weird before you went to bed? I don't know. I mean, no one else could have interpreted it, but God gives the answer to Joseph. God gives him position. It was because of the way that God provides that he's placed in second in command of the nation, put in a position that when his family needed to be saved from the famine, that he could. When all this went on, his brothers hating him and wanting him dead, throwing him in the pit, selling him as a slave, being thrown in jail and brought before Pharaoh, when all of this happened, God was there in it all. I love when reading through his life, and again, I know we skipped a lot throughout the chapters, when reading through his life, how often you read God was with Joseph. I think the Bible does that for a reason, because we read it and we can see, man, this guy went through some terrible things. But God was there. He didn't go through them alone. God protected him in the pit, and God blessed him in Potiphar's house. God provided a way in the prison. God promoted him in Pharaoh's house. Now, in conclusion this evening, I want to kind of apply this a little bit, and I'll wrap it up, because I would venture to say that all of us, maybe nothing that compares to this stretch that Joseph went through, but that all of us have gone through phases of our life that we feel like, well, things just keep going from bad to worse. That I don't know that any of us had life experiences like Joseph, but we've all had those times that it feels like, well, it's just one problem after another. I mean, it's a little bit funny. It's not a killer virus, it's murder hornets. Yeah. It's not one thing, it's another. Yeah. Sometimes it's how it feels. Sometimes, realistically, sometimes that's how it feels. Man, I just am having one problem after another. And every time you think you start to get ahead, you get shoved back, God's still there. In that terrible time, God will protect. He's proved that time and time again. In that terrible time, God will provide, even when we can't see a way out, and even when it isn't the way out that we had in mind. Just like I'm sure Joseph's idea of getting out of the pit wasn't get out so I can be sold as a slave. God will provide a way out. God will bless. Our faithfulness doesn't go unnoticed. God sees and blesses, and God will promote. He has a purpose for it. When faced with that terrible time, rather than focusing on the terrible time, let's look for God. Because He's there, and He's still working. Let's pray. Lord, I pray that You will help us. I know it is so easy in what we see as terrible times, in things like we're facing right now in life, that it's so easy to get focused on everything that seems stacked against us. So easy to get focused on that. If it's not one problem, it's another, and we just get so focused on those that we fail to see You. We fail to see that You're still working. You're still caring for us. You're still protecting us and providing for us. You're still delivering us. You're still working. Lord, I pray that You will help us to learn to look for You. No matter what else is going on around us, Lord, help us to learn to seek You. Pray this in Your name.